Herzlich willkommen bei meinem ersten Livestream, das ich auf meinem eigenen Kanal führe. Mein Name ist Jan Ledochowski und ich kandidiere bei der Wiener Gemeinderatswahl am 11. Oktober, wie man unschwer erkennen kann. Bei mir im Hintergrund, man sieht mich doppelt, ja, 2 Jans, wunderbar. Und hier sieht man, wo man am 11. Oktober meinen Namen hineinschreiben muss, wenn man will, dass ich in den Gemeinderat einziehe. 850 Vorzugsstimmen brauche ich. Ich habe sehr, sehr viel vor in diesem nächsten Monat. So Gott und Corona wollen, werden wir uns persönlich treffen, auch auf Veranstaltungen. Wenn nicht, wird sich natürlich alles noch sehr viel mehr als sonst üblich in Social Media und online verlagern. Ich freue mich, dass ich heute einen ganz besonderen ersten Gast habe und wo ich dann auch gleich in die englische Sprache werde wechseln müssen, nämlich, wie die Freunde sie nennen, Uju oder Dr. Ekeocha. So, welcome Uju here in Vienna or London, where you are.
Thank you so much, Jan. I'm so happy to be here this afternoon speaking with you.
Wonderful. So let me introduce you again to our guests who are watching this live. Uju, you are a doctor in biomedicine.
I'm a scientist.
You're a scientist. You're a
that's
scientist.
Right, yeah. In biomedical science, that's right.
Yeah. You live in London. Originally, you are from Nigeria, and you have founded Culture of Life Africa. And you are a very loud spokesperson, you know, for protection of life, protection of marriage, protection of family, but in general also speaking for protection of the whole of Africa, which you feel is very much under attack by Western liberalism, by Western ideologies. And I really would love to talk about this with you because this affects, of course, Austria and Europe as well. We need a good neighbor in the south. We need a wealthy and stable neighbor in the south with its own culture. And so we should work together in this direction. So, but please, before we go into the details, please tell us more about you and about your work.
Thank you so much, Jan. Obviously, just as you said, I'm originally from Nigeria. I live in the United Kingdom. I came to the United Kingdom 14 years ago, so I have been here for a little bit of time, and I've been working here. I've had the privilege to work in the National Health Services here in the United Kingdom, so within the NHS, as a scientist for this period of time. But I became quite activist and quite aware, first of all, about what was going on with African countries and Western countries on a certain interface. I became aware of it back in 2012. So that is already now 8 years gone. And it really happened because the wife of Bill Gates, Melinda Gates, who I'm sure everybody knows, even people in Vienna, Austria will know Melinda Gates because they're very prominent people on the international scene. They were doing a huge project that I felt was actually quite overreaching for an American couple to come into African countries to do what they were going to do, and what they were doing was population control. So that was really what triggered me, a scientist, to become activist as a pro-life spokesperson. But not just that, but I started reading and studying and trying to travel, going places, trying to understand this concept of neocolonialism between African countries and Western countries. So I became quite activist about it, started writing about it, talking about it, and listening to people as well in their own experiences about it. So that's really the thrust of my work. And it does, as you said, it does include things like, the protection of human life, the protection of human dignity, the protection of children from certain ideologies that would harm them. And as it pertains to Africa as well, so I have been on this journey all these years, talking and speaking about it. And here I am today. I'm very happy to share my thoughts and my experiences with all of you.
Wonderful. So so let me maybe speak now from our perspective here in Europe. So what we see in Africa, we see what comes into our mind. It's a rather poor country. It's a very unstable country.
Yeah, continent.
Gets
Yeah,
a lot of aid by Europe and the United States.
Yes.
And I must, in the past years, we've heard some good stories. Maybe we had a summit here in Vienna, an African summit, and our chancellor invited many, African leaders. So there we have good economic partnerships. But what worries many of us here, and I'm not speaking now about myself, the population grows and grows and grows. There's no responsibility there. Those people come to us. Yeah, they seek refuge, they seek wealth. We understand that, but it's impossible to have every African coming to Europe. And so that's why it's very necessary that we provide, it's good that the United Nations, the European Union provides, birth control and abortion and et cetera, family planning in order to help you.
Yes. Okay. So here are actually a few thoughts that I have about that, but also a few facts that people have to know, because this is an overarching thought that, yes, this is the point of view of those who are living in Western countries, in Vienna, in the United Kingdom, in the United States of America, Canada. This is really what fuels some of the agenda to bring in population control to Africa, but it is all predicated on some misconceptions and some a bit of ignorance on the part of many, but it's not really their fault. The thing people should know is that African continent, as it is, African continent has 55 countries making up all of Africa. Our population density, which anybody who knows or studies anything about population must know that population density is actually what is most important. It's not just a matter of counting how many people in a certain given area. It is how many people who are within a square mile, or so we measure and get to compare countries, different countries and continents by population density, most importantly. An African continent, and even when you put them individually as countries, we do have considerably lower population density than most of the Western countries. I'll give you an example. The United Kingdom has a much higher population density than most African countries, which most people don't even realize it or think or talk about it that way. Whereas the United Kingdom is, has, I think, something like more than 70 people per kilometer square. A country like Ethiopia is still around 30, so we have in Africa about half, or in some countries, even less than half of the population density that there is in, that you find in Western countries. Now, then you ask, so why is it that people are running away? And why does it seem as if you guys are doing nothing but having children? Well, the birth rate in Africa has also been falling over time. The only thing is that we haven't had a precipitous fall as you've had in Western countries. So we stand out quite vividly, whereas in places like Asia, where they're having even a diminutive return, where people are having children at a rate that isn't even up to the replacement rate. In African countries, we do have what you would consider a normal birth rate, especially among the educated ones. So we have some problems that have then caused it, cause the effects of the things that you've talked about. So the sort of migration we have, the way we leave our continent, it's stemming from corruption. That even in the least populated African country, even in an African country or regions in Africa where you will have an underpopulation, people are still running out of those places because of the level of corruption among African politicians. The way that wealth doesn't really get to, the wealth of different nations are being shared by only the very top crust of the various nations. Something that I've never seen in European countries or Western countries. The depth of corruption is the worst in the world. So if that is not sorted, it doesn't matter even if Africans are no longer having children. The human beings who are there today are still suffering. And so I think that people feel the need to migrate. Now, instead of the world to surround us and throw, population control at us and ideologies and, they should talk out about things that really matter. They should hold African politicians responsible, and they should call them to bear. So you said your prime minister had an event where he hosted African leaders. I bet you at that event, perhaps corruption and the discussion of corruption may not have been on the agenda. If the African leaders are being given aid of any kind, if they're being given help of any kind by the West, I think that it should be made mandatory that they at least at the basic level show some transparency in their work and how they handle the people. So that's where our problem is stemming from, and it will only get worse. I mean, the fact that people are leaving, unless the root cause is handled, then I think it becomes even more of a problem. And also for the countries where these Africans are going, because it's not a good thing that our system or our pattern of migration is really not good. I don't like it, but I also find it quite disheartening that nobody around the world seems to be able to talk to African leaders to tell them this is no longer acceptable when it comes to corruption and the way they lead their people.
So before we continue talking about how we really could help African countries, I would like to ask you again more about the policies which we, so the Europeans and Western countries, are enforcing on Africa. Could you tell us some examples where we really, by doing this, inhibit, the development of your country and also, disturb your own culture?
Yeah. So whereas I had said earlier that Western leaders seem not to be talking about the levels of corruption, the fact that there is no transparency. On the other hand, what they find easy to do is bringing in ideas and ideologies, especially on sexual related issues, into African institutions. I can't believe that an African president or politician or somebody who has been so coddled and so embraced and accepted by Western leaders and Western institutions, from the European Union to the United Nations, who keep giving them money and enabling them in their lifestyle and in their corruption, that these same people who cannot call our leaders to have some responsibility about accounting for what happens with the monies, is still able to come in and tell us about comprehensive sexuality education and how we should be telling our children about the positivity of things like LGBT ideas and ideologies. They are telling us about abortion.
Would you say that this is a kind of a racism of low expectations?
Absolutely. So this is the great bigotry that we find. The low expectation is almost like, we don't expect you to clean up your house. We don't expect you to clean up your acts as far as embezzlement of money and corruption is concerned. But if you're able to bring abortion to the women, if you're able to teach children these kinds of high-risk sexual behaviors, then you're okay. We can give you more millions. And every year, Western countries actually budget how much they're going to put into aid. So that really means that people from Western countries, every single year, taxpayers in Western countries like Austria, they are giving money to Africa, and yet people who are paying these taxes in countries like Austria, do they know that African leaders are actually not expected to account for the money? Your tax money is probably going to build somebody a big mansion somewhere in the world because they have the money that came from you. But then the idea is also that the donors, the ideas that they bring to us in order for us to qualify for this money are things that are completely, detrimental to us and to our culture. It's against our values. But it's not surprising that our African leaders, because they want to sit on their corruption and stay as long as they want in power, they are able to exchange. You see, it's like, we will do anything you want. We are going to promote any ideas and ideologies that the West is asking us to do. We will not talk about our protection of human life, because African countries, by our tradition and cultures, we are pro-life. But our African leaders can never say they're pro-life publicly because they want to get the money from Western donors. So it is a horrible exchange where some Western ideas from Western liberals, it's coming from a certain part of the West. It's not everybody, but these are being embraced and accepted, especially by African leaders on our behalf, just so that nobody will ask them to be more transparent, to be less corrupt, and so that they can be able to get access to money and aid as much as possible from donors.
Mm-hmm. Because last time we met, you were in Vienna. You were presenting your movie, a documentary.
Yes.
And if you could remind me of the title, it slipped me now.
Strings Attached.
Yes, exactly. Strings Attached. A wonderful documentary, very moving, and it was about a topic of also of abortion. Mm-hmm. And so maybe if you could share your thoughts about that, and also maybe how the West uses the African population for kind of as a laboratory for introducing new vaccines, new medicines, things nobody would ever use in Europe or United States. We freely test in Africa, and we are completely fine with it.
Yeah, so before I go into the details of that, I just need people to have a baseline knowledge that in Africa, I said there were 55 countries. Only 4 African countries out of the 55 have legalized abortion as you have in Western countries. So only 4 of our countries have legal abortion on demand. Whereas there are several restrictions, and in fact, in many places, absolutely abortion is illegal. And it's not like people are fighting to legalize abortion. Most of the African countries, this is the situation because this is what the people want, because we also have our own political systems, we have our legislatures, we have all that you have as far as political structures are concerned. And that we don't have legal abortion means that this is really the desire of the people. Most of the African people are actually pro-life. So now you talked about the Strings Attached. Strings Attached, of course, is a documentary that I made simply because I was traveling to several African countries and speaking to people about their thoughts about abortion and their own experiences, especially with regards to some certain Western organizations who are in Africa doing all kinds of things as far as the abortion is concerned. And this was what gave rise to that. But then it was in doing that documentary and in making the documentary that I got to find out how deeply that Western donors are involved in promoting abortion and trying to fight for the legalization of abortion, even in countries where abortion is not legal. They are fighting for it, they're pushing, and they are sponsoring any small group in Africa that says we want abortion rights. Even if it's just 10 people making up this group, they can get millions of dollars simply because that's what the Western donors are looking for. They're looking for anyone they can use in order to promote ideas. But what I think from my own reflection, Jan, is just as you had alluded to, that we have such weak systems that there is no oversight for almost anything. So whereas even here where you have legalized abortion, which is very unfortunate, I think there is still some oversight and there are still some hurdles and things that doctors must do and, forms to fill and all of that and checkups. But in African countries, you don't have that. So pharmaceutical companies, there is only so much they can do in Western countries. But what I think that they are doing in Africa, pushing for certain things and certain kinds of practices to happen in our countries, is that once Africa opens up to legalize abortion, to the way that the pharmaceutical companies want like every African woman of childbearing age to be on contraception. Once we are open to that, we will then become the experimental ground, the open field, the garden, the farmland for pharmaceutical companies who are looking for a way to do all their trials, their clinical trials, without oversight. It would just be perfect for them. Already we have actually found places in Africa, especially rural places, where organizations, pharmaceutical companies, Western, great, big Western research companies are coming in to do trials on abortion, abortion pills. We found a place in Burkina Faso where for 4 years, a particular group from America came in to do clinical trials on a second trimester abortion by pills, by abortion pills. So these are things that they know they cannot get away with in America or in any of the other, Western countries. But they're able to come in and do it in Africa, and they're able to get data out of it. So we are going to be a big market for them. We are also going to be a huge open ground for them to do all their trials. The same thing goes for vaccine. With everything happening with coronavirus, in the last couple of months, we also found out that there were some clinical trials being done in certain places in South Africa, and it's particularly poor neighborhoods where nobody is going to have an oversight. No one is going to be able to sue anybody if something goes wrong. Pharmaceutical companies and researchers are going in there and they're doing trials as well. So Africa is one big tempting ground for a lot of these Western players who want to make money, and they are just looking for humans, human guinea pigs to use as their own experiments.
So I have a question here for you, but it's an easy one. Where can one see the documentary?
Oh, that's easy. It's on Amazon. So you can stream it through Amazon. It's also on Vimeo on demand. And the name of the documentary is Strings Attached. And if not, you can just go, there's a website, there's www.stringsattachedfilm.com.
It's an Amazon Prime, yes?
Yes.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
It is.
Fantastic. So please, anybody who's watching, please ask questions. And besides, again, I lost a picture. Meanwhile, maybe you were noticing some funny pictures flowing behind me. I'm running for office, Vienna elections, October 11th. I think Uju supports me.
Absolutely.
Do you have your endorsement? I have your endorsement.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. If 850 people write my name here, or the number 33, the age of Jesus when he died, I'm already older, so it's fine. Remember this and get me elected into the Vienna City Council. So, where were we? Yeah. Okay, let's stay here. Let's imagine, and I think I will be successful. I'm in the Vienna City Council. Okay, obviously it's just local politics, but as you very well know, it's a living system. One can influence a whole country by being outspoken, by having a stance. So what would you expect from Austria or from an Austrian politician, how to behave? And knowing that it's very difficult because everybody takes the racist card and says you're a racist, you're whatever. Yeah, you're homophobic because you say don't enforce LGBT laws in Africa. You're anti-woman because you say if they don't want abortion, then God bless them. And you're racist because you say we shouldn't pay aid, and we also shouldn't just invite everybody to come to Europe.
That's right.
So what's your recommendation? What am I supposed to do?
Right. It is actually the politics of today, is the race card where they use black-skinned people to push anybody who absolutely wants anything moral, anything just, or if you have any standards at all on merit, then that's usually a way of knocking you down. But I want to say something here in this forum, which I am very glad to say, that those who are very quick to accuse you of being racist have never taken the time to actually think, what do the Africans want? Because what is racist is not listening to us. And on all these issues you have talked about, if anybody listens to us about abortion, they would see that the majority of the people do not want abortion. In fact, a study came out in Kenya only a few days ago, and I was so excited about this study because so rare do we have academic studies and surveys being done on issues like abortion, on LGBT issues in African countries. Nobody has the money to put into those research, but one was done in Kenya nationwide, which just got published. And it showed that 85% of the people, as of 2020 in Kenya, 85% are still saying they don't want abortion. This is the population in rural areas, in city areas. So you listen to us about abortion, you listen to us on the way parents want to be able to take care of their children, especially their children's education, on sexual and moral issues. You have to listen to the Africans. We are not stupid. Listen to us. And then on immigration issues as well, there is something I want to say. Now, most people say, oh no, if you don't want Africans to come to Europe, then you're racist, you're this. But have you ever taken the time to think how the Africans themselves are actually quite nationalistic? So a Nigerian, for example, is concerned if too many Ghanaian people come into Nigeria. In 1983, Nigeria actually asked all Ghanaians to leave the country. And this was a whole immigration thing. Nobody ever talks about that. In fact, today we know that particular phenomenon as Ghana must go. That even the Africans themselves are protecting their own countries. They're saying, no, there's too many Ghanaians here. You all leave our country, and then you can come back one by one, where we choose who comes in. If we need doctors, then we can get doctors. Africans are not children. We have countries as well. And we are operating on exactly the same kind of premise that you are. We want our countries to be sovereign. We want our countries to belong to us. The Africans are very territorial. We have tribes and ethnic groups that even as a Nigerian, there is a part of Nigeria that I cannot go and really go into politics, because people would say this is not the home of your ancestors. So the Africans are even much more protective of their land and space, and they want to know exactly who is where, who is in their town or in their city or in their country, and why you're here before you can be there. Last year, there was a huge crisis where the South Africans were asking Nigerians to leave their country because something happened. They were beating people up, they were burning houses, but that didn't really make international news. Why? Because it's Black people asking Black people to leave. But Western people should know it. So back to your original question, where you were asking what can you do at the city council once you're elected, as far as Africa is concerned, or not some of these things that I've talked about. It's very clear and very important that Austria is an important country. You are in Europe. I think you are part of the EU. The European Union has a huge say in African countries. So the EU, being EU, they are giving us much of our aid. They have a lot of say on what happens and the policies, all of these things that I talked about. A lot of them have the stamp of the EU coming in. Some of the policies that come in, it was written by Austrians who are around the EU. So if you are there, you know that your people should know and should also demand to know what goes on in Africa as far as aid money is concerned. If Austrians are sending money in aid, and you are, because the EU has also made it necessary for everybody within the EU to donate a certain amount of money that goes to humanitarian aid in Africa and other parts of the developing world. So you should bring it to the attention of people that it's not just a matter of sending millions of euros and then it goes to Africa. You should be demanding to know exactly what the money is going to. And I think people in Austria should be concerned that their money should really go into building up African hospitals, African schools, helping to give real education to the Africans, because the moment we get real education, the moment we are really developing as we should, then we also then stop coming over to Europe, right? It's that we can support our own selves. We want to know how to support our own selves. But also the Austrians and yourself, once you're in the city council, you can begin to raise serious issues that nobody is talking about, like how the African politicians are corrupt. And yes, nobody should accuse you of being racist for asking somebody to account for the millions and millions of euros that they are getting every year. Nobody is talking about that. And so why shouldn't it come from the Austrian City Council, from Vienna City Council? It should. And you should raise it, and you should talk about it, and make people aware of what is going on. The Austrians should not in any way promote anything that the people in Africa don't want or don't support. If 85% of people in Kenya, as we're seeing by data, that they don't want abortion, so why should Austrian money go into providing abortions and abortion lobbying for people?
But how should the aid look like? I mean, should there be any aid? I mean, I've met some African politicians who said, just stop it. Stop it. We want to do it on ourselves. And if aid, who are we supposed to give it? My experience is, so that's what I've heard, that it's always a good idea to give it to church institutions, because they are not part of the government. They are still with the people, and they can build, and they build great infrastructure and schooling and hospitals and so on. But tell me, if we want to help by sending money, how should we do it?
Actually, there's two things, right? So I am of the opinion that African countries should come out of aid. But then, to be realistic, for that to happen, like everything else, any other economic goal, there should be a plan up until when we are leaving aid. So as of now, Africa receives about $50 billion per year in aid, which is unbelievable. If you think about it, $50 billion, it's too much. So, but in any case, that money still finishes every year. And the following year, there will still be another 50 billion. So I would like to see a plan for us to go from 50 to 35 to 25. That's progress. And that can be achieved over a period of time. It's not just to go cold turkey, like, okay, we tomorrow morning you don't get anything. Then of course there will be so much unrest. There will be so much. I think the backlash will be too much, and it will cause more of a problem. But let there be a very sensible plan to come out of it, because the best position for us is to not be aid dependent, as a lot of African countries are right now. It's that we're completely living it, but over a period of time. And people should know and ask that question, shouldn't Africa be coming out of aid? And then if you are going to give aid, I also support the idea that you mentioned, which is going through and approaching faith institutions, churches, denominations. A good example of that is actually Hungary. I know that Hungary, from experience, has given directly to churches, and they've worked hand in hand with churches for various reasons, because the church will never be as corrupt as the politicians. The money that you give to a politician may or may not be used for the purpose, but if you give it to a church, or if you go through a church, or for those who are Catholics, for example, if you give it to a particular religious congregation, that money will go to a school or a hospital or a facility or a project which is serving especially the poor. Our African politicians live so high away from the people. I don't know if people can imagine it. They're almost in a different and separate world. But churches are in communities, and they know best how to allocate things, how to help people. They know people by name. They know the people who need things the most. So that is one thing that I think is a great idea. If there is a way it can be done through government aid, I would say that's perfect. Hungary has achieved it. Before, I used to think maybe a country cannot give to a church, but Hungary has shown us that that is actually possible, and they have done such incredibly amazing work. And I think that other countries should look to doing that. And mind you, for people who are worried to say, but what of those who are, not Christian, or the churches are serving everybody. I know that because I have worked in an African hospital before. I went to an African university. I went to African primary school. The churches serve everybody. They don't even ask you who you are, what you are before they give you treatment in their hospital. Is always best that way. But there's also another thing. I think that education is also one area that aid should really go to. I think I'm a little bit biased because I just want to see such better education in African countries, because I think that makes a lot of difference. Those who have had education, much better and higher quality education, have come out of poverty without the need of any aid. If you have, your education right, then you can go on and be a doctor and be a nurse and be a teacher in your community, whereas you could have just been nothing and been taking aid or be depending on the food that is coming from a free program from America or from Europe. So I think that is also something that, more scholarships given particularly to school related programs, because we just don't want someone giving us food every day. We want to learn how we can earn our own food.
I have another question for you. How does one answer someone who constantly says the world is overpopulated, especially in developing countries? Africans make too many babies. Why do they make so many babies if they can't even feed them and they all go hungry? Is the theory of overpopulation even true?
It is not. Let me start from the last part of the question. It is not true. As I mentioned earlier, if anyone has access to internet right now, why don't you just put into Google the population density of any African country that comes to your mind, say Tanzania or Kenya or Nigeria is actually the biggest, but in terms of population density. But just put any African country and then put it to the side, then put Germany or put France and then compare the two numbers and see that the population is not the problem. What usually happens in African countries, whenever you see pictures, it's like why is there so many people in these pictures and videos that you see coming from Africa? It's because everybody wants to live in like one or two cities in a country. So in Nigeria, there are a few cities where everybody migrates to, because we all want to live there. There's electricity, there's running water, and there are schools for the children. People are trying to go to where there are facilities and where there are jobs and the commercial centers. And then in our villages, there's no one. There's no one in my village where my parents live. There's no one because there's no jobs and they don't always have electricity, but everyone is running away from there. So it's not, it's actually a myth. And no, we are not having more babies than we should. If anybody would check it, the problem that is happening is the demographic winter happening in certain parts of the world. And once you put the African birth rate and the replacement rates side by side, what is happening in European countries where there is 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 replacement rate, then of course it looks like we're having so many children. In fact, I can tell you for a fact that among the educated Africans, and back to that thing I said about education, the fact that somebody spends time getting an education even reduces the possibility that you're going to have children. If a girl gets married at 17 or 18, she's definitely going to have many children, by the time she gets to 40. But if that same girl spends another 10 years in school, getting an education, going to university, maybe getting a master's, there's no time. She ends up having 2 or 3 children or 4 children. But it's not, the overpopulation is definitely in the way people look at it. It's the way the media has shown it, the way a lot of the world that is telling this African story, the way they have narrated it, it's quite not like that. And it doesn't quite work like that. In my family, we're 6 of us. I'm number 6 of my parents' children. But at no time did we have a house where we were sleeping on top of the other, because by the time you even have like a fourth child, your first is grown, you know. So by the time I was growing up, there was just me and my brother. It always seemed as if my parents had 2 children, but they had 6 of us. So it doesn't work out that way. It doesn't work out that way. What the Africans need are well-educated families. If we were having just 1 child or 2 children per family, as they're telling us now to have, the problem is that if we are not educated, if they turn out to be poor and wretched, it's still 2 poor children that you have. And the fact that you have 2 children does not even guarantee that you're going to be able to send them to school when there are no schools in your community. So I think it's a whole human integrity approach that people should be thinking about. Africans are not pets. We are not children. We are not, we're not stupid. When people have education, they usually, they're usually more focused on career, more focused on working within their communities. But then that's not the way people think about Africans. They don't think of us as people who can be builders of our own community, of our own society. They don't think of us as teachers and doctors and scientists. They're thinking of us as just people who like children that you're just feeding, and so there's like 10 more to feed and you're just feeding them. No, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. And we do have less population density than most parts of Europe.
And besides, there is no population explosion. We already know that in, yes, I think, 70 years latest, yes, population declines worldwide.
Yes.
It's a demographic fact. So yeah, I don't know, maybe we still remember, how we talked about population in the 70s, but it's just not true. And there's a famous...
Paul Ehrlich wrote the book that got everybody running up and down. He wrote the population bomb, and since then, everything that he predicted didn't happen. And even before him, there was, there had been people talking about it where it's like the human resources are going to be finished and everything is going to be finished and we're going to be killing each other for resources. But that just has not happened in any population or in any society where you have 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. They are thinking how to maximize the space, how to be more productive. They're going to be inventing more things, so there's all of that. But when people think about Africa, nobody thinks that we can ever be that smart to invent anything, to think of how to further sustain our society. No one is thinking about us that way. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, it's that bigotry of low expectation, is that the Africans are just stupid. They're just there and we need less of them. And we need them to understand there has to be less of them. Why though? Why? Assuming things were good for us, assuming our politicians weren't stealing money, unfortunately, then we would have been developing and doing things for ourselves. And even now, there is a lot of ingenuity within African communities, but no one wants to see it. They just want to see us as people receiving aid, and the people who give us aid, they love it. The governments who are giving us aid want us to be those babies always waiting for money every year. Why don't they encourage us to be more, to be more creative and more innovative and do our own thing and develop our own nations? It's incredible.
Speaking of racism and low expectations, what are your thoughts on Black Lives Matters in the United States? And maybe we could reflect your thoughts on our situation in Europe and in England.
Yeah, because the Black Lives Matter has also come here as well in England, and we've seen them already throwing out statues and all of that in the heart of London and attacking government spaces and all that. I'll say one thing. I do not support Black Lives Matter from day one, because first of all, I had to find out what it is that is the root of the organization and the movement, to know who founded it and why exactly they founded it. Of course, I want racial equality. Of course, even from before I came to Europe, I always had this thought in my mind where, oh gosh, I hope when I go to Europe, I hope they will treat me as equals. And if anyone is wondering, no one has ever been racist towards me. I am just saying that I know sometimes people are irritated when I say that, but I personally have never experienced racism. I know maybe perhaps people have in different places, but I believe also that even the racism can happen from Black people, it can happen from white people, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be a white person being racist towards you. In my own country, we have this thing called tribalism, where if you're not from a certain tribe or a certain part of the country, you actually will be denied a job or, school admission. These things are happening in real life everywhere. So I know about discrimination, but then it's so unfortunate that there is this whole narrative that has been locked down that it's only white people who can discriminate. No, actually, we all have it in our DNA, and we all have to work hard to overcome it so that we accept people. If someone is from Nigeria, the person doesn't have to be from my tribe. If somebody is not Black, and then I'm in a position to give the person a job, I have to be able to understand not to discriminate against that person because I could. And if I do it, is that not racism? So I do not accept the theories that Black Lives Matter has put forward. Of course, that they also now are coming up very clearly with some of their principles, and they are clearly Marxist principles. They are going certain towards a certain ideology, political ideology. They are also combining it with some LGBT thing, and I don't know what that has to do with Black Lives Mattering. They also are discriminating quite actively against white people in society, and even against Asians, if you think about it. So it's about, just as Beyonce had released some song not too long ago, she says, Black is king. And I always, once I hear that, I always cringe, because what does that mean? If Black is king, what does that really mean? Of course, I really want everybody to think of ourselves, everybody as equals, and you judge people by their skills, by their education level, by their own character and their own integrity, and not by the color of their skin. So it's Black Lives Matter has done much damage, I think, to society and to the way people think. And I think that already the world has gone so far. It has progressed, in a sense of speaking, as far as racism is concerned, that today we should really be having less talk and less thought about somebody's race. I think we had gone further than that, and now they're trying to pull us back. To back in the 50s and 60s, and that's a horrible disadvantage and a horrible disservice. But also something else is happening, and I think we're going to see more of the results in a couple of years. All of this talk, the children are listening. Little children are actually listening, and they are taking in all of this. You are talking about Black Lives Mattering, and if anybody says anything about all lives mattering, you go at them, you attack them. You are saying things about how you are trying to dismantle the white man in society and all that, but little children are listening. Little Black and white children are listening, and that is also shaping their own thoughts. And children are so much more easily easily affected and influenced. In fact, a friend of mine was saying, she's from the United States, how her child came back from work and came back from school and was crying and saying, Mommy, why is it that we have to be white? Why are we white? And why is it that we have so much privilege? So they are coming in with these kinds of things. And imagine that little child, that you in a way, what you are doing is really what was done to Black people 50, 60 years ago. We walked away from all of that. That a Black child might come back and say, oh my gosh, why am I Black? Why do we have to be here? That's what they did to them. And I thought we have come away from it, because now the pendulum has just swung the other way, and it's just as evil. That a white child comes back from school and then she's crying about her privilege. That is evil. An innocent child that has done absolutely nothing, has nothing to do with any of the things that have happened in society years and years and years.
I think the danger is that there will be a backlash.
Oh, it is. It's coming.
So it's coming. Very, very dangerous, yes. And I have another question here on YouTube, something what I wanted to ask and I almost forgot, so thank you for the question, because you put out a video which went viral. about the attack on a Nigerian
Yes.
priest seminary,
Yes.
and which has been ignored by, I'm not talking about the world medias, but even by Nigerian medias and even by the government in Nigeria. Everybody pretended nothing happened. So the question is, Christianity is growing in Africa, Islam and extremists as well. What do you think about this problem, especially in the north of Nigeria? And do you have any experience in this topic? Because Islam is also a big threat for Europe in these times.
Yeah, so what has happened in Nigeria struck me quite deeply, because as I mentioned earlier, I did grow up in Nigeria, and I was in Nigeria my whole life up until just 14 years ago. And the whole time growing up, Nigeria was a 50% Christian, 50% Muslim country. And we didn't really have any clash. We lived in different parts of the country mostly, but we didn't have any real issues, about Christians being targeted or anything like that. We were observing Christian holidays like Easter and Easter Monday and Christmas and Boxing Day. We also were observing Muslim holidays. So we had a lot of public holidays growing up, and everybody was fine with it. And there was a lot of respect for the churches, because the churches, of course, as you know, we migrate and we are everywhere serving in different communities, even in Muslim communities. But then this thing started happening in northern Nigeria, where, especially in Kaduna State, but even not just Kaduna State, there are other surrounding states as well, where the herdsmen rose up and they started attacking people. And you ask, who are the herdsmen? Now, the herdsmen were always a nomadic people. So they would be the cattle rearers, and so they didn't really have their own villages, but they were understood to be nomadic. They would take their cattle everywhere around the north, grazing. And then, then that was how we got meat in the country, because they provided us with the meat that we needed. They were rearing like thousands and thousands and thousands of cattle. And they themselves as a tribe were growing with their cattle. If you see what I mean, they were having children and moving with their families. And then in the last couple of years, they've become very violent. I don't know how they got armed, but somehow they got armed. And then there are these villages in northern Nigeria, in the southern Kaduna. So get this right. This northern Kaduna is a northern state, but then the southern part of that northern state is predominantly Christian. There are some Muslims there, but they are predominantly Christian people, surrounded by Muslim tribes. Like they're surrounded by the Hausa Muslims, but they've been there for at least a century. They have been there for this length of time, and never had any problem. They had their villages, they had everything in place. They were serving the community. A lot of them, because they're Christian, they had a lot of Christian influence. So many of them are really like doctors, and they have like a service oriented, in what they do. Many of them are the ones who build hospitals and serve their community. And all of a sudden, these attacks started being directed towards them. It has been fierce, it's been horrible, it has been heartbreaking. But what is even more heartbreaking is the fact that the entire country surrounding them is just ignoring. This is a country of 170 million people. There is no one, there's no major thing that happens within media addressing this, perhaps, unless more recently, a few people have started talking out and speaking up. But then it's still something that is largely being ignored by the political realm and the political class in Nigeria. They're not really taking it up. And the problem is that when anybody says that this is really an attack on Christians, those politicians, those same politicians who are not saying anything, want to attack you, and they want to silence you and get you to not say anything. And they say you're trying to bring in a religious divide in a country that, because we're 50-50, you are trying to bring in a religious war, which is not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to highlight the fact that the world should know. And then the Western media, of course, is not really talking about it, because, again, Christians are being affected predominantly. So it's been a real problem. It's been on my mind. And yes, I did make that video, which I was very emotional making that video. That would not be the normal thing I would talk about. But when they're kidnapping seminarians and killing people and in their sleep, people who are just in bed, and then these people attack their villages. It's something that I couldn't help but speak out about, but I think the world should know about it. The larger topic of Islam and how it's affecting people in the West, I don't really know that much because I grew up in a Christian region. But my own experience is also that sometimes it is from the leadership of those groups who, refuse to address, as we see what is going on in Nigeria. There are Muslim, highly placed Muslim politicians who will not in any way even admit that what these people are doing is wrong. That the day I put out that video to say these Christians should not have been killed, they shouldn't be, at this point, they shouldn't be dead, this shouldn't happen. There were people calling me out and threatening me. I was getting death threats on that day that I put out that video, and even the next day, just because I spoke the truth. And I think that really also shows or reflects in what happens, I think, largely in places where there is violence coming from Islamic terrorists. It's that their leaders will not even agree or admit the fact that this is happening.
Uju, 1 hour has passed.
Oh my gosh.
We've never had a chance to talk that long, So we needed elections to find the time. I would like to end this with one last comment, which is in Facebook, and I think which is very fitting. Okay. Somebody is writing, I finished reading your latest book, Target Africa. It was passionately written and eye-opening. It changed my understanding in a number of ways. Yay. Perfect. Yeah. So buy it in your local bookstore. I hope it's there. I don't know, but it's on Amazon
at least. It's on Amazon and it's on Kindle, so you can read it today.
Yes, I will. I will read it. Thank you so much, Uju. One last question: who do you recommend for the Vienna elections?
You.
Surprise. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, Jan. You are my favorite candidate, and I am so happy that you're doing this. And if you remember, for years we've talked at different forums in the past where I've told you you're really fit for politics. So the last time when we were together and you said to me you're thinking about this, I was very pleased. So I absolutely recommend you, and I endorse you, and I will also be keeping my hope alive just to see you win the elections.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you to all listeners and viewers, and have a good evening.